Guys, welcome back to another episode of SoCal Watch Review. This is episode 7. This is Miguel. I got some exciting news for you. I got my boy Perry Ross, P. Ross, on the line, and the announcement is that he's going to be now my permanent co host. So, P, how are you, sir?
Yo, what's going on? What's
Hey,
good with
man.
it?
No, it's good. Well, thank you so much for accepting my offer or invitation to be the permanent host. It was a little hard to do it by myself, but now having you on the other line, this makes it a lot easier, a lot funner, I should say. And yeah, man, I'm excited.
Abso-
Thank you.
Absolutely. This your boy P. Ross in the building, represents SoCal Watch Reviews podcast, bringing that flavor like a pack of now laters. You understand? So let's do this. Let's do it.
That's exactly why I brought you on board. There's
Let's
just no
do it.
way I can do that. But we do have a special guest, and P and I are super excited to have Mr. Cameron Barr with us from Craft and Tailor. Cam, how are you?
I'm great, guys. Thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you for accepting our invitation. We just started this thing, and we're getting some momentum. And I came across your channel on YouTube, and I definitely had to share it with P. We both fell in love with your content, with your personality, with everything you're doing. And yeah, thank you so much for. And before we go any further, as our guest, Cam, what's on your wrist?
Uh, well, I'm actually wearing a 626 for Paul Newman Daytona from
Oh wow!
1970.
Oh
So,
wow!
yeah, it's a pretty incredible watch. It's essentially it's a bicolor dial. It's the white dial variant, which is pretty incredible, and it's also very rare. But that's what's on my wrist for today. Yeah.
All right, well, P, what's on your wrist?
Omega Seamaster DeVille from 64, stainless.
Cool.
Yeah,
So
no, that's a beautiful watch, super cool. And yeah, I know P is doing the vintage. I'm doing the vintage as well to represent a boy Cam here. Obviously wearing the Speedy automatic here with that crazy patina. I love it. Reverse Panda 3511. It's a reference number. So yeah, we're wearing that in your honor, Cam. We're both Omegas, and we don't have Rolexes, or else we would have done the Rolex. But
Vintage represent. I love it, guys.
yeah, no,
oh yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so Cam, why don't you? So obviously, P and I, we know a little bit about you, but why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you and about the company and how you guys started into the hobby?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been collecting for about, I guess it's going on like 14 years, 15 years now. I guess it's a sign of old age, right? But yeah, started collecting about 14 or 15 years ago. And I was in technology and, kind of came into a bit of success. And I wanted something that was different and something that had meaning and purpose and a tangible exclusivity to it. A lot of the guys that were in my peer group were, going out and buying modern, brand new watches. And there's nothing wrong with modern or new watches. I actually like modern watches quite a bit. But I wanted something that was different and something that flew under the radar and something that was special to me, not something that I could just kind of walk into a boutique or something like that and buy. And so that's kind of what got me into vintage watches. And, like most things in my life specifically, I'm not one of those dudes that just, stops there. I have to understand every detail and understand the history behind things and all that kind of stuff. And so I started just reading a lot of blogs and back then books and things like that to learn about vintage watches and the history behind them and the technical developments of these watches. And, technology kind of burnt me out. I was working with a bunch of really incredible people, but guys that just kind of were more concerned about the P&L than anything else. And so I kind of had I guess, my early midlife crisis where I decided to chase and do what it was that I was passionate about, which was vintage watches. And I started Craft and Tailored to help guys like myself who, had an interest in vintage, get into, the hobby, and to help them with collecting. And 4 years later, here we are. We have a 1,200 square foot, or I'm sorry, 1,600 square foot showroom in downtown Los Angeles. And I've literally traveled the entire world, chasing watches and meeting people. And it's now I think my life's passion and my life's work. And so, that's what I do full time.
That's awesome. And YouTube, you've had that for what, just a few years?
On the YouTube, actually not a few years at all.
Oh, really?
We did a couple of videos, maybe a year or two ago, or maybe even 2 years ago, just to kind of test it out and just kind of for fun. But we didn't really start taking it serious until about maybe 6 months ago. I had a friend who was like, "Hey, we have these great watch hangs, and I come to your office, and you're meeting all these great and interesting people. Why don't you do a YouTube thing?" And kind of like most things in my life, even like vintage watches, I had a really good friend who pushed me kind of into doing it full time. I kind of was like, do you think people would really want to, listen or hear me talk about this stuff? Oh, okay. Like, I guess, I'll try it out. And so, we've been doing an interesting series, and there's a lot more in store from a YouTube and from like a social media perspective. But, people are always wondering what I'm wearing and what's on my wrist and why it is that I'm wearing it and all that kind of stuff. So, so I started this little series called "What Is on My Wrist," and basically I talk about and review and kind of go through the watch that I'm wearing at the time of that recording, and it could be anything from a Paul Newman Daytona or a rare Patek or something as simple and as kind of utilitarian and cool as a Seiko. So it's just kind of what's on my wrist at that moment, and we kind of go through the history and all that kind of stuff and try to make it fun and interesting.
Yeah, no, it's an awesome channel, and it's awesome what you're doing. It just has a really cool vibe to it. When I first watched it, even the intro with the music and your Porsche and the espresso machines, there's something about it that's just like I mean, I don't know about you, P. How'd you feel about it?
I mean, I really feel like it matched like the vintage watch thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when I saw like a lot of your tattoos you got. You know what I'm saying? I'm a guy, I got a few tattoos. You know what I'm saying? And that was kind of like, okay, this guy's actually relatable. You know what I mean? So that's the way I felt about it.
Yeah, no.
Sorry. Good.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I really do, P, because I'm just a normal guy who has a passion, and I think the thing that makes me maybe unnormal is I just really embrace my passion. I really go after it, and it's one of those things where people are like, I get asked this question a lot, like, what's it like chasing your passion, and what's it like doing this, and what made you do that, and all that kind of stuff. And the thing is, you have to really love it. You have to, in order for the passion to take care of you, you have to really kind of embrace it. And I'd be doing this if the market was bad. I'd be doing this if the market was good. I'd be doing this if the market was doing whatever. I'd be talking about the watches I talked about if they were popular or cool or uncool or whatever. It really is my passion, and it's something that I really love. And and I'm me. I'm not. I think for a long time too, I was kind of afraid to be me. I was afraid to kind of chase my passion and really pursue the things that I love so much that ultimately made me who I was as an individual. And now it's something that I just kind of have learned to celebrate and just kind of do just because I want to do it. So I appreciate that feedback, man. That's nice to hear. And, it's cool.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Absolutely. We know your love for vintage watches, right? So what's your take on brands coming out with vintage reissues?
I think it's cool. I actually did a video, a little bit of a spoiler alert here, but we recently got a Hodinkee Blancpain 50 Fathoms. So Hodinkee did a collaboration with Blancpain where they kind of reissued a modern homage to the 50 Fathoms watches out of the late 1950s and early 1960s. And the case was, smaller, and the loom had kind of like as they call like a faux Tina, right? Like a little bit of a like a more yellowish patina, and I really like it. I think it's really cool. I gravitate towards those watches a lot because sometimes with the vintage stuff, even though I'm wearing something today that is, as one would probably say, priceless, it's kind of like a blue chip watch where there's very few of them in existence and it's almost irreplaceable. I think that there's something that's fun and special about those watches where, you can kind of live with them and you can kind of, wear that watch and create your own adventures with it. And that's the thing that I really like about the modern reissues, so to speak, is it's a watch that kind of has that vibe and feel and character, which makes me, think about myself differently and think about a different time and place. But it's something that I can create my own adventures with. And that's, something that I feel a lot when I look at those watches. And I think it's cool. I think it's cool when brands kind of celebrate their heritage, because I think that's also what makes a lot of these brands like Rolex and Omega or Patek or, Blancpain or whatever, so special is they're iconically designed timepieces. They're so cool. And there's a lot of history and heritage there. So I think that, the brands that are doing this and doing it right, I think it's kind of cool because you have that vintage style and aesthetic, but you have those modern watchmaking elements within the pieces that make them a little bit more durable and a little bit more, modern and fit for wear in today's, kind of world and environment. So I think it's really cool.
I think that's super cool. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I was going to say, it was refreshing to hear you say about the Fotina, because I know P and me personally like the Fotina. There's a lot of haters out there like, oh, they're trying to be, that vintage look and this and that. But what they need to understand, and you hit the nail right on the head, Cam, it's a watch made from yesteryear to be able to wear in today's as an everyday watch, because I don't like wearing my vintage watches for many different reasons. One of them, water resistance. It's like, right. I know I could get it tested or whatever, but it's just like I'd rather just get something new and know that it's new and it looks old, but it's new, So yeah, that's cool.
Right.
Yeah, totally. And it's almost like not to dwell too much on the question or that topic, but I think the thing that's kind of interesting too is you look at some automotive brands out there like Singer Porsche, right? Like Singer did a really good job of creating kind of the ultimate Porsche 911. And, although the price point is kind of crazy for a Singer, the wait list is like, 2 years and the price is pushing $1 million for some of the cars that they put out. But they basically have kind of created that classic 911, which is also very functional and reliable and kind of in the modern era with those classic, styling elements. So I'm a big vintage Porsche guy for sure, but I like brands like Singer too. As a Porsche purist, I don't hate on those kind of modified things, but I also look at them for what they are. I don't think that it's the brands out there in kind of bringing this back into watches. I don't think they're trying to dupe anybody. And as a vintage dealer and a guy that is a vintage watch enthusiast and considered by a lot of people to be an expert, I don't hate on that. I also look at it for what it is, very much in the same way that you do. I don't think that they're trying to encroach on the vintage market or anything like that. I think they're trying to kind of fill that gap between functionality and also a stylistic detailing that is, kind of more classic but still functional. So I think it's cool.
Yeah, I like the fact that the companies are actually embracing their past. And we, if you're talking automotive, I'm thinking of the Mustang a few years ago, right? They brought back that body style, and now you see it everywhere. I mean, it was a massive success for them. So in the watch industry, same thing. A lot of these vintage reissues are selling very well for them. So there's just absolutely no reason why they shouldn't do it, So
I think it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. P. I know you had a question about this turtle that we were kind of talking about.
Yeah. Right. We recently saw your video about the Seiko turtle, the 6309.
Yeah, the 6309 7040. Yep.
Yeah, it was refreshing to see someone that deals with very high-end exclusive pieces. Talk about a brand like Seiko. Me and Miguel, we kind of love Seiko. Well, I ain't gonna say kind of. I'm minimizing that we love Seiko. So what's your take on watches that are in the sub $1,000 range?
I think they're awesome, you know, and as a collector, I think one of the things that people are really surprised about when we talk is that, you know, I'm actually a collector. There's watches in my collection that I just won't sell. And some of those watches are very exclusive and, again, priceless. And some of them are kind of simple. I have a couple of Tudors in my personal collection. I have a couple of Seikos in my vintage collection. I have a Jaeger LeCoultre that is in my vintage collection. And, you know, some of these watches, again, are sub $1,000 watches. Like, I think the 6309, which is one of my favorite watches in my collection, it's actually, I think, my most favorite watch in my collection. I think you can get those watches for like $500 to $600, you know, for a good example. And I think they're great. I think that, you know, watches, you know, create an experience for me and invoke emotions and all of those things. And, you know, that Seiko 6309 to me, the story behind it is I actually met a really great, you know, peer within the industry and a great friend. His name is Eric Wind. And Eric Wind was the president of Christie's Watches and, you know, owns a company called Wind Vintage, who's a peer and a counterpart of mine in the vintage business. And Eric and I actually bought Seikos together. We were at a vintage show in Miami. There was a kind of an old school watch dealer kind of watchmaker there at the show. And he had some really cool Seikos in his case. And I bought a 6309, you know, Seiko Turtle. And Eric bought a Pogue.
Oh, nice.
And, you know, those are two watches that that are kind of inexpensive, but very cool and very historically relevant. And there's a lot of pop culture and history behind those two watches. And it was also kind of a, you know, the mark of the start of a really good friendship and kind of almost watch brotherhood between Eric and I. So that's why I love that watch, and it's very cool. And, you know, what's even more interesting is I travel with that watch. I literally have been around the world twice with that watch. I've been to Bali, I've been to Paris, I've been to London. You know, I went to Hong Kong recently, and I brought that watch with me, and you know, it's one of my most favorite, most coveted watches. And I think that vintage and cool watches and uniqueness and independent taste and style doesn't have to be expensive at all. You know, and the other thing that's interesting is good quality doesn't always have to be, you know, exclusively expensive either, right? Some things are rare because they're limited in production, but that doesn't mean that they're, you know, of a high build quality. And that's the thing that I love about Seiko and some of the sub $1,000 watches. You know, you don't have to, you know, spend 15, 20, 30, 100, whatever $1,000 to have something that is cool and unique and of quality. So that's the reason why I did the video on the Seiko. And we actually, I'll look for watches like that. It's funny. We'll post a, you know, $200,000+ Paul Newman on our site. And then right next to it will be a $450 Seiko Turtle because I believe in the watch and I love the watch. And I think that, you know, people that are getting into watches should have something that is accessible and fun and cool and not really pretentious. I don't think that I look at things from kind of a pretentious perspective either, or at least I try hard not to, because I think that this stuff should be experienced and explored and be fun and cool. So that's kind of my little background on the 6309 for sure.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful watch. Beautiful watch.
Yeah,
Sure.
no,
Thanks, man.
and
Yeah.
I like the fact. I mean, you said something about Eric Wynn, right? That you connected on a different level, and that's such a cool thing about our hobby is we could all have different opinions on politics and religion and whatever. I mean, I could go on, and we're all different nationalities and ethnicities or whatever. But when it comes to watches, we could all kind of speak the same language, even if somebody likes a Rolex, somebody likes a Patek, or somebody likes a Seiko. You all appreciate the craftsmanship and the artistry behind it, right? So that's super cool. That's my take on it. So
Yeah, thanks, man.
and I know something that you and I kind of talked about, Cam, and off the air was perceived value, and I think you had like a really good story about Louis Vuitton and what people think, and watches were built a different way before than how we see them now. So I don't know if you care to share with the listeners a little bit about perceived value versus actual monetary value.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, you know, one of the things that's really interesting about vintage watches and you know, kind of perceived value and tangible value and things like that is, it didn't always start off that way. And I think that things that are now considered a luxury item, um, and I see this consistently throughout different brands and things that I think are cool and have an iconic history to them. But I think something that's very interesting is if you look at a brand like Louis Vuitton, not many people know the story or the history or heritage behind Vuitton. And he was a guy that worked in Paris in the hotel industry, and he was like a bellman, like a bellboy, and he handled people's luggage all the time. And he basically saw that the luggage that people were it wasn't built well. It wasn't built, to a high standard. So what, Mr. Vuitton did is he went out and he created his own luggage company, and he created the highest quality luggage, that he could possibly make. And what ended up happening is the affluent or the well-off, type of customer could afford that type of quality in a piece. And that's kind of how a lot of these watch companies initially started. Is it was about creating something of quality and something that was of precision and of high manufacturing. And it didn't really translate into a luxury item until much, much later. So we see that with a lot of like brands like Hermes, Louis Vuitton, Rolex and Cartier and things like that. Maybe Cartier and Patek being on more of the luxury side, or what we would consider kind of like the jewelry side a little bit. But if you look at a brand like Rolex was making, dive watches that could withstand certain pressures, back in the 1950s and into the 60s, that, were serving a purpose and creating a functional element to the watch that was needed for technical requirements within that era and time. And kind of same thing with like Louis Vuitton and some of these other luggage manufacturers and things like that, and other companies, right? It wasn't about creating something that was that had this perceived value of affluence or luxury. It was about creating something of high quality and high build. And that's one of the things that I really love about a lot of these watches as well, like Rolex and Blancpain and or like a brand like Doxa, creating dive watches in the 1960s and into the 70s that were serving a purpose and providing a functionality that was needed, based on a set of requirements that were being pushed, right? So, it's kind of interesting to think about watches and things like that from that perspective, instead of, kind of the status symbol that they've ultimately become. Like you see a Rolex today and you're like, oh, that guy must have money or whatever, right? Back in the day, it wasn't looked at like that, so yeah, kind of interesting.
So you think that was the when they first built these Rolexes and started coming out like the 7 and everything, you really think that Rolex just strictly wanted it to be a tool watch, or they had hopes that it would become a luxury item and be kind of a contender like with the Pateks and the Cartier?
I think maybe a mix of both. Rolex created the first waterproof case, or one of the first waterproof cases, I should say. And so I think that they were pushing the technical boundaries, and I think that Rolex still as a company is doing that. Same thing with Omega and a lot of the other companies, right? Like, developing like from hairsprings and the coaxial escapements and leveraging those technologies in their watches. I think that, these companies are, pushing the technical elements of what it is that they're creating. And I think that that's what they do as a company. I think that there definitely is a luxury brand kind of element, right? Like Louis Vuitton now, their bags are still high quality and things like that, but they're ultimately very much a luxury house, right? They're a brand that is a luxury brand. So, I think that they are that now, and maybe they definitely market and kind of push the customer towards that kind of exclusivity and things like that, especially with the ridiculous wait lists and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know if it was their intent necessarily to be a luxury house, right? I think it was maybe a little bit of both, especially considering that Rolex did have things that were more kind of like in the jewelry or high fashion side instead of just the tool watches. I think for Rolex and maybe even Omega, it was a blend of both. But I don't think that they initially set out to be that, especially if you look at fine watchmaking like way back, right?
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a mix of both.
That's interesting you say that. Yeah. Well, what's your take on it, P?
Hello.
Oh, sorry. I
Hey,
said, what's your take on it, P?
Okay. Well, as far I think the story about Louis Vuitton is very, very interesting. I was a Louis Vuitton guy there for a while. Um, just knowing like because I had saw that story on the podcast you had did with you told that same story on the podcast. What was the podcast, Miguel? Um,
with Dean Del Rey.
Yeah, Dean
yeah,
Del Rey. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that was
You
an
told
amazing podcast, by the way.
you told that same story, and then like I got to thinking like not I have a couple Louis Vuitton goods, but I've sold a lot of stuff. But um, I think the Rolex. I think they all aspire to be somewhat of luxury goods. You know what I mean? Like regardless from like even like a company like Invicta. I mean, as crazy as this may sound, you know, they aspire to be up there with companies like Rolex and you know what I mean? Like they do. They do. You know what I mean? So which brings me to my next question. What's your take on the current Rolex bubble? Is Rolex trying to position itself as a Patek Philippe or AP? Um,
Uh,
are they holding back certain models? You know what I mean
yeah,
to make more money, and you know,
yeah. So is Rolex? The question is Rolex creating a false sense of exclusivity
right,
by holding watches and creating a limited supply and something like that, right?
right,
And
right,
is there a bubble to that?
right. Because
I would say,
I understood that Rolex like they made like maybe 1 million watches a year, I think, something like that. And I guess production has slowed down, so they say. You know, so I was just kind of like wondering about that.
yeah, I think that's a great question. It's a question that I get asked frequently, especially since a lot of the watches that we deal in and or have dealt in, um, are sometimes considered, investments. And I think that watches in the past 5 to 10 years, especially on the vintage side, have moved into that recognition of being, a an asset class of its own. So, yeah, I think that what's interesting about that is that there is, I think that is going on. I think that they might be holding that back and delaying production, and it's kind of a bummer to me because Rolex uh, was a company that was accessible and created tool watches and things like that. But I think that if you look at Patek and AP, the process in which they create their watches is a lot different than the way that Rolex create the watch. There's still a lot of hand finishing and kind of bespokeness, if that's a word, to those watches, which actually tangibly limits the supply. Where Rolex is a very mechanized company, leveraging technology to ultimately create their watches. So I think there's a bit of a bubble, and I think that ultimately, Rolex will the production will catch up with the available supply. So I think that there is a bit of a bubble there, and I think inevitably steel watch production within Rolex will catch up with with demand. So supply will catch up with demand on the secondary market, and I think that we'll see prices go down. I've already started to see that a little bit. I've already started to see, for example, right now in the past week, I've had a ceramic Daytona that was full set, black dial, and I have two Batman GMTs. One is a Jubilee and one is an Oyster, right?
Oh wow.
And I'm a guy that doesn't even really look for that stuff. It's just stuff that has kind of come to me through different trades and different opportunities. So I'm definitely seeing that stuff, and the market for sure has changed. The Rolex Batman Jubilees were trading at the time of this recording, about 2 months ago at 17,500. And as of right now, they're trading at maybe 13,500, 14 max, right? So even in the past 2 months, 3 months, we've seen prices kind of start to drop on stuff like that. Which I think is cool for the consumer and for the market, because these watches are now going to become more accessible. But I think the problem is that there are people that have bought these watches at 20 and 30,000 when they were new and unavailable, and those are depreciating assets. So it's kind of a bit of a bummer for those guys that bought high. But I don't think you should buy a watch for that reason. I think even at the investment level, you should buy a watch because you really like it and because you have a connection with the piece and because you have a taste about things, versus just buying it just to buy it or buy it just for an investment. Especially modern pieces where Rolex is really able to crank out a lot of watches because of mechanized technology that exists now that didn't exist, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I think we're seeing a natural progression of technology from a mechanized perspective increase the amount of production and things like that for everything: cars, watches, bags, plates, forks, knives. It's inevitable, right? We live in a very technical age, which things from a consumable perspective become a lot more readily available. And that's one of the things that I really like about vintage too, is there is a tangible uniqueness based sometimes on the quality of watch or total number of watches that are actually out there, based on the production of watches from an era as a result of the way that those watches were being made, right? So that's another kind of stuff, a thing that I love about vintage. But to answer your question specifically, P, yeah, I think that watches are, and Rolex in particular, I think there is a bubble, and I think watches will come down just based on the available supply catching up with the demand of the market. So yeah, I think that there is a bubble.
Right. And you said something else very interesting about vintage watches and the quality of vintage watches. Since I've been kind of dealing with vintage watches lately, I kind of find that the quality of vintage watches can't be touched. You know what I mean? Like, there's a certain, the way they were built, it seemed like they were built more to last than some of the pieces now. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. You look at, some of the brands out there today making different things, and Rolex, Patek, AP, all these other watches are, they're still very high quality, right? I'm not, talking smack, so to speak, on those watches at all.
Right, absolutely.
But I think that the circumstances in which a lot of these watches were built in the past, I think it was like you're going to buy this Rolex and you're going to have this watch for, the rest of your life. Whereas today you're like, I'm going to have a Batman and I'm going to wear that for a year, and then I might get over that and I might then go after this and that and the other thing. And I think that the time and place that we live in, fashion and cars and things like that, it's kind of disposable, and I kind of feel bad for the ladies out there, because these high quality, like, couture things, right, that are made and expensive, it's like they're in for a season and then they're out, and you're like, oh, I just bought this bag and I paid like $10,000, $15,000 for this bag, but now they're now it's the season changed and this bag is out, right? And so I think as a guy, sometimes it's like you buy a pair of jeans or a pair of boots and you're like, all right, this is like my classic style and this is what I'm going to wear forever. I think things were built like that more so back in the day, where, you would build a watch or make something, and the idea behind it was that you would buy it and it would last you a lifetime. Whereas today, now I think the consumer market, looks at things differently, and they look at things much more from a disposable perspective as they once did. So I think you see that in the quality and in the finishing and in the craftsmanship. Like, for example, some of the like the Patek automatic watches out of like the 1950s and the 1960s. Mm-hmm. If you open up, the case back of those watches and you look at the finishing in those movements, it's incredible, right? Like, the rotor itself is finished, the bridges are finished, and they have what would be called a perlage. There's perlage on the inside of the case back, and these are things that you would never even see as the consumer, right? Like, as the average guy wearing a Patek in the 60s or the 70s, you're not going to open up your watch and look at the movement to make sure that the bridge or the case back is finished or whatever, right? But it was like a maker's mark. It was such high quality back then that all these things had like a very specific level of finishing on them that I don't think you really have now, just because it's like, oh, this is going to be in 1 minute and out the next. And so kind of interesting to look at it from that perspective, for sure.
That's awesome. Well, in my opinion, you hit a lot of points, and I'm writing things down because I'm like, oh man, you're hitting so many good points as far as the disposable market. And it's crazy to think of something disposable that's in the luxury sector, because money is very hard to come by, at least for me and for P and for a ton of people here in the US and even people listening across the world. We're talking about thousands of dollars. It's not something disposable, but I think a lot of these social media has had a huge influence on society, not just in the watch industry, but in everything as a whole. And obviously, Rolex is a huge player, a great marketing house, and that's what really made them what they are now. But I really think that maybe people back in the day had the mindset of, I'm going to spend my money, buy something good, and this is going to last me a lifetime. And they were okay with it. They were happy. But as a society now, and us being a younger generation, maybe we don't look at things that way, and we want more, and we want more, and we want more. And in my personal opinion, that's a problem, because I don't have that specific mindset. I buy something for it to last, and I'm not trying to buy the next thing, and I'm not a hype beast or whatever you want to call it, you know? So
Right.
that's just kind of my take on that. And then also, Cam said something very interesting about people that are buying things as an investment. Now, I've heard a lot of different takes from different people. Some people say buy a watch because you love it, not because it's an investment. But I understand when these guys have a ton of money and they have that kind of money to buy a Daytona, a vintage Daytona or vintage sub or something, they obviously look at the monetary value in that and say, okay, is this going to go up in value? And they look at things differently. But in my opinion, it's like, if you're going to buy something, buy it because you love it, not because of how much it's going to be worth. And to be honest, I don't feel bad for those people that bought a Batman a few months ago for 17, 18, and now it's worth 13, because I could assure you that those specific people have that kind of disposable income, and it's not going to hurt their pocket. It's going to hurt their ego because now they made a dumbass decision, but whatever, what does it really matter, you know? So
Yeah, and I think a lot of those people, and I'm not talking smack on them at all. I think preference is preference, and I have my own opinions about things, but I'm kind of, I kind of just listen to self, and I'm not trying to get all like philosophical and hippie
please do,
voodoo
Cam.
on you,
That's what
but
we do on the show. We talk politics, religion, sexual orientation.
Right.
you
There
got
it
it.
is.
Yeah.
There it is.
But I kind of just I kind of just like what I like and do what I
That's
do
cool.
because I do it, and I guess for me, if I can inspire somebody to be into something and to have a perspective and taste on something, I think that's one of my ultimate goals in doing this is, I drive a vintage 911 because I really love vintage 911s. I've always loved vintage 911s, even from when I was a kid, and I love the brand of Porsche. I listen to records and vinyl because I think it's an interesting way to listen to an artist's composition of tracks and music and things like that versus just kind of digitally listening to it. And I do a lot of the things that I do because I like them, not necessarily because they're, in or out of fashion. Um, but I think, what yields that type of response to the market and what yields that kind of I guess consumerism, if we want to call it that, is technology, right? And
Yep.
You look at your phone, it's like I hate paying so much money for like a brand new phone or something like that, because that in 6 months another phone's going to come out and that one's going to be obsolete. And I hate to say this, and I think that technology is cool because I come out of that sector, right? I relied on my customers needing to refresh their technology in order to sell them more.
Correct. Yep.
That was my job for a really long time. But I have this thing that, and I know I'm probably going to offend some people, but this is just my opinion. I have on the tachometer of my Porsche, I have this little like stamped out sticker that says "fuck your Tesla."
Yep.
And
Right.
the reason why I feel that way is because that Tesla, even though it's a great piece of technology and it's an innovation in itself and all of that stuff, it is going to become obsolete. And so this status item and this luxury item and this kind of perceived element of exclusivity really isn't that exclusive and really isn't that sustainable, because in 2 years or in 6 months or in 5 days, that technology platform is going to become obsolete. And that's something that I really love, and something that I think is incredible. But ultimately, it's something that I don't really holistically believe in, because I like something that stands the test of time and remains an icon and a classic. And talking about my vintage 911 and my obsession with these things, it's like my 1975 911 is always going to be a 1975 911. It's always going to feel the same and create the same experiences and emotions. And some of these things kind of just continue to get better over time. And that's the wonderful thing about vintage. So I think that I don't necessarily fault the consumer. It's just kind of the time and place that we're in, where things are so consumable and moving so fast that, of course, like this item of luxury and status is, of course, going to become dated and obsolete, and it's kind of a bummer, you know. So
no, I agree with you.
yeah.
And speaking of technology, I know a lot of people hate on Apple Watches. I have my take on them, whatever. My wife has one, and they're cool. But I think, again, you said something very interesting. So technology just evolves so quickly, and tomorrow, really, a new technology comes out or whatever, and your thing becomes obsolete. As in regards to mechanical watches, I mean, you could talk 1930s and still be relevant and working. And an Apple Watch, I mean, with all the updates and whatnot, it's really irrelevant. You can't even use it after a few years. And that's just one example. And I love your example of your Porsche. I feel the same way as well. So I like Tesla, so I don't go too as far as to do what your feelings towards that. But and then as far as the finishing, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, when you're talking about the finishing of the vintage versus the modern, of course, I can't speak to that because I haven't been around as much as you have, Cam. I mean, you're in the industry. We're just enthusiasts. But something Mr. Jack Forrester said in one of the Houdinki podcasts is very interesting. And I need to do a little more research on this, but it really struck a chord with me. And he said something in regards to, he was comparing Grand Seiko or the Japanese to the Swiss. And he was saying how they both have this mentality of finishing things correctly and done correctly. And the reason why is because the Swiss, I don't know if it's still relevant, but I know this is more like back in the day, they felt like God was watching. And them being, in Christianity, they felt like they had to finish everything and do everything correctly and not cut any corners because there was a higher being watching over them. And I thought that was very intriguing. Same thing for the Japanese. Obviously, they believe in different things, but they had the same mentality of, we need to do this correctly and not cut any corners, even if nobody's going to be looking at the internals. It's more a sense of pride and ownership, really, because this becomes their baby. They just created something. So I thought that was super interesting, and I didn't even know that. I didn't even think about that. So that's super cool.
Good.
Yeah, I actually was at an event with Jack from Houdinki maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm on a lot of airplanes, and I'm literally bumping around the world a lot, but so I kind of lose track of time. But I was at an event with Grand Seiko in Los Angeles, and there's watches there that are incredible. Like watches, even as a vintage connoisseur and dealer of watches, that I was blown away by, and such value and things that I think are actually timeless. Believe it or not, to say that a modern watch today could be a timeless object, I think is very relevant and very much apparent with Grand Seiko. They're pushing the boundaries of design, but there's such a craftsmanship and such a classicness to those watches that, there's some watches there that are 5,000 that really should be like 50,000 because of, the finishing and things like that. So going back to like our beginning discussion of buying something that's cool, but not at a, $100,000 or $200,000 price point. I think you can find that in brands like Grand Seiko, and Jack is a huge ambassador for them. And he, the cool thing about Jack is he's a no bullshit guy. He really, likes things and has a really good, valuable opinion on things. And I really respect and value guys like that in the industry. And he's a big proponent of Grand Seiko. Even in their vintage pieces, like the vintage Grand Seikos, they're incredible. And I think there's a lot of value in watches like that, and they're kind of sleepers, which I really like because it allows guys like you and I to go out and find those watches and enjoy them and not pay
premiums.
a crap ton of money for them. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
cool. And I've heard a lot of people say, if you want to impress non-watch people, you buy a Rolex. If you want to impress watch enthusiasts, you buy a Grand Seiko. And I agree 100%.
Yep.
And it's cool that Grand Seiko is making such a push to the market and trying to market themselves a little bit more, because people are really sleeping on Grand Seiko. And something that happened to me, and that has nothing to do with Grand Seiko, but I was wearing my Seiko Sarp, the 33. And one
Hmm.
of my
Yep.
coworkers, he saw it. He's like, "Hey, that's a cool little watch. What is it?" And he saw the name on it, right? The brand. He's like, "Oh, Seiko. Oh, don't they make like calculators or something? Is that like a cheap watch?" And it just really hurt my ego, to be honest with you. And it just kind of hurt in general, because I'm like, God, man, like people that are not watch people, they just don't know. And it's like, I'm not gonna go about to explain this whole thing, because he's not gonna care. He doesn't care about watches. So Seiko really needs to step it up, and I think they're doing the right thing. You know, they're moving in different directions, and Grand Seiko's definitely gets my kudos. You know, so I would love to own one. So absolutely.
Oh yeah, they looking great for real. Like,
Yeah, no, for sure. Now,
ooh,
Cam, you
mm.
were speaking about Jack, and I respect Jack. Obviously, I don't know him, but I've heard him talk plenty of times. Very intelligent individual, very insightful. But obviously, he's from Hodinkee, and I know that you run in the same circle as Hodinkee, and Hodinkee being a huge influencer in this whole watch game.
Yeah.
How does it feel like? And not to take away anything from you, because you are badass, my friend, and you are a person to watch in the watch industry. And to be honest with you, you are an influencer. And if you're not influencing other people, which I'm sure you are, you're influencing me personally. Just your style, your take, the way you speak, the things you like, you're influencing me. And I like it. But how does it feel running in the same circle as these guys?
Well, one, I am flattered by your comments there. And again, I thanks for having me on the show. I'm honored to be on your show and to have been interviewed by you guys. I don't really like to think of myself as an influencer. I like to think of myself as somebody who inspires people, and because that's my ultimate intent. Like, when I'm out in the world doing what it is that I do, or when I'm writing about different things or talking about it, I want to inspire other people to, explore their own passions and look at this stuff maybe in a similar way that I do, but also in a way that's unique to themselves. So I really appreciate that comment, and again, thanks for having me on the show. It's an honor for me. I guess running in that circle, so to speak, is interesting. Like, Ben is a great guy. Jack is a great guy. I love Hodinkee. I think they've created something that's really great. And I think the cool thing about Hodinkee is they inspire a lot of people as well. And so they're in a way like my heroes. And I think what Ben did by starting the blog and kind of doing that and writing about things is incredible, because it's gotten a lot of people very interested in things that they might not have otherwise been interested in.
Correct.
Matter of fact, I was at the Hodinkee offices yesterday, and then the day before. I'm currently in New York and kind of bumping around, and I'm a guy that multitasks quite frequently, so sorry for the background noise.
No, it's
But
okay.
I think it's incredible, and I feel honored to be included in a lot of their stuff. And the thing too is, if I'm inspiring people, that's one thing, but I'm also constantly inspired by other watch blogs and other guys and things like that. And that's the great thing about this community is we inspire each other at that level. I think you're around some very interesting people. We have a lot of celebrity customers and guys that are very influential that are now kind of my friends. And the thing that I think is very interesting is that when you get to a certain place with your collecting, you're it's not even about flossing a piece or collecting something to one up somebody. It's about sharing an experience and sharing a passion. And that's the thing that I think is so special about that. So yeah, it's cool. It's cool to be included in some of this stuff. I've been asked by a lot of people to provide feedback or write articles and to provide my opinion on things. And it makes me feel special that somebody would even care about my perspective and or opinion. So it's cool.
Well, you're a very special guy. You're super cool, and thank you for being on the show. P and I are
absolutely,
super
absolutely.
honored. We were super excited. We're, like I said in the beginning, we're a small podcast, like really small compared to anybody else. But to have somebody of your caliber meet with us or talk with us, and we're just enthusiasts. We're not in the watch world at all, like you are. It's super cool. But speaking of Hodinkee, how do you feel about all the limited releases that they're putting out? I mean, they have some incredible stuff, and they always sell out. It doesn't even matter the price; they constantly sell out. How do you feel about that?
Um, I mean, honestly, and I'm a guy that really expresses a very honest and direct opinion. Um, and I love Ben. I love Hodinkee. I love the brand. I love what it is that they've created. I think there's been some hit or misses. I think that there's been some really incredible things that they've done, and I think there's been some not so incredible things they've done. I think that that's the fun of doing this is that they're able to do things and kind of play with these brands and experiment with stuff, and I think it's been really a fun and cool thing for them to do. I mean, when we started the show, I was talking about the Hodinkee Blancpain. I think that is an incredible watch, and an incredible watch for a lot of different reasons. It's a watch that really spoke to me, and it was a watch that I acquired without really wanting to pay a premium for it. I think the price point was really cool, and I think it was a fun watch to the enthusiast. The other thing too is they made 100 of those watches, not 10,000, not 5,000. So I think it's tangibly exclusive. I think there actually is a real deal limited element to those watches because there's only 100 of them. It's not even a watch that's offered in the Blancpain catalog, so I think that that's pretty special. So I think I take the limited edition stuff with a grain of salt, but also I think I look at it on a case by case basis. Some of the stuff I think is really cool, and some of it I'm like, okay, that's just a marketing thing, and that's not really for me.
Yeah.
But
No, for sure. Well,
yeah.
one of the watches that they released that I thought was pretty cool was that Oryx, that 65, that diver. I love that watch. So for me, that was a win. And
Awesome.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, no, that's super cool. Thanks for letting us know about that. Is there anything in the future for you though that you want to work with a brand, put a limited edition out, or could that be a dream for you? Or
Yeah, the one thing that is kind of funny as like a quote unquote influencer and or brand ambassador or whatever you want to call it, is that I think sometimes maybe people are a little bit scared because I just give them the no bullshit
mm-hmm.
feeling. And so if I did work with a brand, and we might do that, and I think that would be a fun place to get to. I think I would be very specific and very true to what I loved if I was asked for, my design input on some of these things. And we get, hit up a lot to do certain things or to promote certain things. And if I don't really love it, or if I'm not into it, I won't promote it. The last thing that I actually think about in doing what it is that I'm doing is the money. It's never been about the money for us. I'm not creating a YouTube channel and I don't, we don't need the money. We do this stuff and we talk about this stuff and we promote this stuff because we really love it. Like I shoot Leica cameras because I really love them. I was just in Hong Kong for 9 days and I shot the Leica Q2 in Hong Kong and did a review on that. And that was a sponsored thing that we did, but I really loved the Leica Q and I wanted to experience it. And I gave some pretty candid feedback on that. Yeah, I think it would be cool to do some of that stuff, and I think it would be fun to do some collaborations. But we also say no a lot, just because I'm very true to what it is that we do and what it is that I feel. I'm not really influenced by money or the fame or any of that kind of stuff. I just kind of like doing what I do and being who I am, and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of my
that's cool. So it's fair to say
That's
that
what's
you rejected the movement offer. Is that when they came to you for collaboration? I'm just kidding. No, thanks. That's super awesome.
Yeah, I think it's really respectable that you do it for the love of it instead of for the money aspect. You know what I mean? So I think that's definitely dope. So
yeah, kudos to you.
absolutely,
We can
yeah,
relate to that.
yeah.
yeah. And you know what, man? Like I reach out to people all the time. Like if I think something is cool or whatever, like I just pick up the phone. I call people. I'm like, hey, I really like what you're doing. I like your art. I like your style. I like your passion, you know? So I would encourage other people, you know, regardless of where they're at, to pick up the phone or send a DM or whatever. I get, you know, people sending me DMs all the time. And sometimes it's hard for me to respond to the DMs because we get so many a day and we get so many emails, and sometimes people get a little bit like bummed out that we don't respond to them. I try to respond to everything as fast and as best as I can. But yeah, like there's a couple guys that are, you know, like, I can't believe you responded back and thanks for, you know, and I'm an enthusiast, man. Like, I'm just like you. I'm the same guy. I like, you know, vintage watches across the board, whether they're $1 million or, you know, $2 million, or whether they're $2,000. You know, I spend just as much time with a guy who is buying his first vintage Datejust or his Seiko as I do with a guy that is buying, you know, a $500,000 Paul Newman or $1 million Patek or something like that. You know, to me, it's kind of all the same. And again, I know that might sound weird, but price point and exclusivity and all that kind of stuff is really looked at kind of secondarily when I talk about and look at this stuff and do all this. So
Yeah, I appreciate
yeah.
that, man. And I could attest to that because on my YouTube channel, I only have 240 subscribers. I don't have a ton of videos, and I reached out to Cam because I saw his video, his channel, and Cam, you responded to me, and you we started DMing each other, and that's how we put this whole thing together. So yeah, I appreciate that, and I love the fact, and P, I know you could attest to this. We both hate snobs. The pretentious people with
Oh
money,
yeah.
or because you own something, you're better than somebody else. Let me tell you, my friend, you are not. Just because you own something expensive, you have more money, doesn't make you a better person than somebody else. So, Cam,
Totally.
I appreciate you being the way that you are. Please don't change. Clearly, you're not, because you have the success, and we could see it, and you're still just a humble guy. And hopefully, hey, one day we could meet up, peace, and in a completely different state. You and I are in Cali, so hopefully we could link up. But hey, P, if you're down here, I would love to meet with Cam and shake your hand and thank you personally. And yeah, just look at all your wonderful watches in your collection, or that you sell in your shop. That'll be awesome.
Yeah, and if you're ever in, you know, downtown Los Angeles, would love to have you come by our showroom and have a watch hang. You know, that's one of the things that I really love about this, and part of the reason why we, you know, created our showroom and are doing what we're doing is, you know, I think these things should be experienced and enjoyed. So yeah, I mean, if you're in the neighborhood, give me a call. Would love
No.
and hang out. So
Yeah,
Cool,
yeah, yeah. No,
cool.
will do. So, Pete, you got
Yo,
anything else? I know we took a.
yeah, yeah. Do you have a Grail watch? See, me personally, I fluctuate back and forth. I'm kind of bipolar with it. But do you have a Grail watch?
do I have a Grail watch? I think I did have a Grail watch. Like when I first started collecting, there were different things that I wanted to not necessarily own or obtain, because I don't really feel like you ever own or you know, like, hold these things. Even like with my Porsche 911, you know, it's funny because that's a car that I'm kind of looking after. And Patek has like a really great saying, and I think it's the best marketing campaign in the world. They say you never really own a Patek Philippe. You kind of merely just look after it for the next generation. And
Mm,
so
That's cool.
mm.
so I kind of look at it like that, right? I think that for me, my Grail is the next experience that I'm going to have with a watch. So I think that there are watches that I've been looking to experience and have gotten to experience recently. Yves Saint Laurent is a big inspiration for me. I love him as a designer, and I think he did some incredible things. And Yves Saint Laurent wore an automatic Cartier, and I recently got an automatic Cartier into my personal collection from the 1970s, and it's an incredible watch. And I'm kind of in that honeymoon phase with it, and I'm wearing it frequently. I don't know if I necessarily have a Grail.
Hmm.
I think I have kind of a lot of my Grails already, and that's not something that I'm saying as from a pretentious perspective. I'm very fortunate, and also you know, have some things in my collection that are incredible. But you know, also a Grail to me isn't necessarily an expensive watch. Like I think like the Cartier, for example, was like kind of a Grail for me, and that's, you know, it's a sub, you know, $15,000 watch. The Seiko 6309 was kind of a Grail for me. I really liked that watch, and it took me a minute to realize that that was a watch that was really going to be a Grail for me, and I found a great example and kind of added that into my collection. So I don't know if I have a Grail necessarily, but I would say that my tastes and my influences on things are definitely always changing, and you know, I'm looking at things differently, and the way and the process of my evaluation and understanding is through these experiences. It's like, you know, driving a 915 gearbox in a 911, or wearing a Cartier tank automatic, or experience a different exotic dial Paul Newman or something. Those, I think, formulate your taste and your appreciation for things. I think it's experience that develops that stuff. There's a lot of guys out there that are influenced by what other people say, and they don't really understand what it is that they're lusting after, right? And so I think there's a difference there, and I think there's a subclass of collectors and people that are enthusiasts that, you know, develop their taste and appreciation for things based on their own experiences and their own independent views on things, which I really love. And there's some things that I just don't dig and I don't like. Like, I'm not really a big fan of Richard Mille. You know, that's kind of a bad watch.
Richard Mille.
Oh, yeah, there you go, Richard Mille.
Oh man.
Wow.
But, you know, it's not something that is for me, but there are a few customers and a couple of collectors that have them, and I appreciate them. I think that they're cool. I think they're interesting. It's not a watch for me specifically. It's not a watch that I'll go after, and it's not a watch that I'll push to own, but it's something that I can appreciate. And I love the agree to disagree. That's what makes this stuff so much fun, is you have different tastes and perspective than I do, and I have different tastes and perspective than you do, but together we're able to grow and learn. And that's something that I really love and appreciate. So yeah.
Well, that
Absolutely.
was a great answer. Wow. I would have just said the name of the watch that I wanted, and that's it. But no, Cam, every time I hear you speak, you're super quotable. And one of the quotes that kind of really stuck with me was when you said, buying vintage is entering into story, becoming a part of a process, and being a part of history. That's incredible. That's awesome.
Totally.
That's crazy. So, Cam, I think we took enough of your time. I know you're a busy guy. I really appreciate you coming on the show. P as well.
Absolutely.
So before we let you go, why don't you tell everybody where they could find you, your YouTube channel?
Yeah, definitely. So you can find us at on the web at craftandtailored.com. And then our Instagram is just Instagram, you know, /craftandtailored. And I think the YouTube channel is the same. So just, if you just Google or search Craft and Tailored, you can find us pretty easily. Yeah, feel free to check us out, or send me a DM if you listen to the podcast and have a question about something. And you know, always happy to pass on what I know and help people learn. So thanks, guys, for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And you know, hopefully we can do something in the future again. And you know, wish you guys all the best success. So thanks again, guys, for having me. Really appreciate it, and honored to be a part of the show.
No, thank you. Thank you. We definitely appreciate this.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Cam. So yeah, thank you again to Cam, to our guest, Pete. Thank you so much, and to everybody listening. Hopefully, you enjoyed this episode. Cam is an incredible person, incredible influencer. Although he doesn't want to admit it, and in my opinion, he is, and he's a very knowledgeable guy. So thank you again. And yeah, thanks for listening. And you could find us on YouTube, SoCal Watch Reviews. And my boy P, Ross Rich Watch Love, and same thing on Instagram, same name. So yeah. Thank you again. Anything you want to say, P, before we close off?
Nah, just keep it real. You know what I'm saying? We bringing that flavor like now, ladies. Come on in. You know what I'm saying? Get into it. Get involved.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So with that said, thank you again for listening, and remember, my friends, stay humble.
See you guys. Thanks.
All right, guys.
All right. Yep.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Cam. Take care.